Hi, I'm Faye Viviana and I am your secret ballet coach. Today we are going to be talking about the common mistake or the common correction that you might be hearing of heels down, heels up, heels down, right? So this is going to be a correction you probably get when you are jumping or relevéing or working on point. Those are the most common places you're going to hear this correction. So, first of all, heels down. Why is your teacher telling you to put your heels down? It means that your heels are creeping up, like so. That might look like this in fifth position. It might be in first. It might be on your landings that they land and then they pop up afterwards. But it means that your heels are not staying on the floor when they're supposed to be staying on the floor. This is not the easiest thing to fix, so we're going to talk about a few reasons why that might be happening for you and things you can do about that to correct it. Number one reason you might be getting this correction all the time is because you have too much tightness in your muscles on the back side of your legs. That can be in your ankles, in your calves, in the back of your knee, all the way up through your hamstring, and even in the back of your hip. So you might have what's called your posterior muscle chain, that's all of these muscles in the back. They might be too tight. So when you're trying to plie, they're holding on and they're not really able to lengthen all the way down. So if you feel like that is you, most likely you're gonna feel a really, really intense stretch when you try to reach forward, touch your toes. When you do a calf stretch, all of those positions are gonna be extremely tight and painful. So the most important thing you can do in that situation is when you are warm or after class, you can stretch. You want to do extra calf stretching, extra Achilles tendon stretching, extra hamstring stretching. So some very basics is like this, like your calf stretch, you want to make sure that your toes are in line with your heel. You're not turning out, you're not turning in. It's nice and parallel, and you're just going to reach forward, bend that front knee, and try to push back through that calf and get a stretch. That's the basics of a calf stretch. It also might be something where you can put your toes on the stair and hang off the edge of a stair or push forward towards the stair with your toes lifted. It could also mean that you lay on your back, like so, and with square hips, you grab a hold of your leg and you stretch it. You want to try to make sure your knees stay straight. And that's a nice hamstring stretch. For those of you who do yoga, it might be that you work on your downward dog, which looks like this. Your hands forward, you're gonna lengthen your back and push back towards your heels. You're gonna hold that for a really long time until it eases off. The key to any sort of stretching like this is that you don't go too far. It shouldn't feel like your muscle's about to tear. It should just feel like a strong stretch. If you don't feel anything, that might not be a good stretch for you. I wouldn't recommend just pushing and pushing and pushing further. But you want to find a place where it's hard to hold it, but you can hold it, and just take deep breaths and just try to ease off that position. After about 30 seconds to 2 minutes, you should feel that ease off. So that might be one reason. It might be that the back of your legs is too tight. You can work on that just by stretching. The second reason is that your weight might be too far forward over your toes, right? So when we're setting up to dance, we're often trying to stay on the balls of our feet, right? You might hear that your teacher says that. It doesn't mean that your heels don't have any weight in them. It just means that you're not sitting back in your heels, right? But sometimes we get a little overzealous with that correction or with that concept, and we actually rock a little too far forward. Now what happens is when all of your weight is shifting forward, whether that's in fifth or in first, and you're basically leaning on your toes, right? You're leaning on the front part of your foot. Your body is going to try to hold on because it doesn't want you to fall over, and it will lift up your heels and engage the back of your legs to help you from falling over. The problem with this is you are going to exhaust and tighten and wear out those back leg muscles because they're going to be working twice as hard when they're supposed to be resting. So if you think about it, plie is actually one of the times in our classroom that we get to stretch our Achilles tendons, right? Now, if you always rock forward and you pop those heels up, notice that these Achilles tendons never really get to stretch. So what happens? Over time, you get what is commonly called just a repetitive or overuse injury, like Achilles tendonitis, because it's never getting the chance to lengthen out the other way, and so it gets too tight, it gets swollen from that, and then tendonitis develops, which just means that your tendons are swollen. So if that's happening to you, I recommend going to see a physical therapist so that you can take care of that tendonitis, because that's really important. You don't want to leave that for too long. And B, you want to just make sure that as you're taking class, you're not pitching your weight too far forward. You want to be able to really get that weight right over your hips, right over your knees, right over your feet. And you should feel that your foot is actually flat on the floor underneath you, so that you get that heels down stretch in the back of your tendons there, okay? So it could come from pulling your weight too far forward. Number 3, there is something called a mechanical lock in certain joints in your body. Your elbows have them, your knees have them. Usually they're the most obvious in joints that bend like 2 directions, not circular joints like your shoulders or your hips, right? So your knees and your elbows have them. And basically what mechanical locks do is they protect your body from blowing out that joint. So they're in place as sort of a subconscious mechanism to keep you from busting open your knee. So when does your mechanical lock kick in? Your mechanical lock kicks in when you're in a turned out position that is too turned out for you. And so your knees are not over your toes, like that. So your mechanical lock is gonna kick in as soon as those knees hinge forward to protect you from, hopefully, to protect you from blowing out your knee. So there's a couple reasons why this is gonna make your heels pop up. Because if you are catching impact, right? If you are landing from a jump, if you are coming down from a releve, you are catching your body weight in your joints, right? Your hips, your knees, your ankles are your shock absorbing mechanism for your body. If you land and your mechanical locks have to kick in so that that doesn't blow out forward or backwards in your knees because they're not aligned, it's gonna pull your heels up, because basically what it does is it stops your knee from continuing to bend. It just sort of locks them out, right? So when you lock them out like that, your heels pop up because the momentum has to go somewhere. It can't just stop. Momentum is momentum. It's a much bigger force of nature than us. So it will go out through your heels popping up. So the most important thing you can do in that situation is try to get those knees out over your toes. So if you're in plie, you should be able to take a string from the center of your kneecap and drop it down to the floor like a little plumb line, and it should land right between your first and second toes. If it's landing forward of your big toe, then you are likely not going to be able to put your heels down, because that mechanical lock mechanism is going to fire, and it's going to fire to protect you from blowing out your knees. It's a very important correction, because not only will it help you correct getting your heels down, it will protect your knee joints and your ankle joints. So it's a very important correction all around, because if you are not aligning your knees over your toes, there's a whole host of injuries that comes with that. I mean, that's how I blew my knee out. So I am talking from experience. You want to make sure that that joint is right in line with your foot, okay? Reason number 4, you might be getting a lot of corrections about your heels popping up, could mean that when you are in a plie position, you are dropping your hips too far back. So that means that basically the momentum of your weight coming down from the jump or from the releve, instead of coming down in a straight line, it's coming down in a back diagonal like that. Now, what you'll see is when I demonstrate that slow motion, my toes want to pull up, right? Well, your brain is going to anticipate that, and to keep you from falling backwards, it's going to shove your weight back into your toes and keep your weight balanced in the middle like that. So that's something that's very interesting about dance and how our brains work. You can't really trick your brain. Your brain knows if you're about to fall. Your brain knows if you are in an unsafe position, and your brain knows if something is not aligned correctly, and it will do its best to compensate and help you. You may not be aware that it's doing that, but it will try. So when you have your weight too far back in your pelvis and your butt is sliding backwards on your landing to protect you from rolling your ankle backwards or even worse, popping your Achilles or your back of your knee backwards, it's going to push the weight back forward by pushing all of that momentum into your foot. So it could mean that your hips are sliding back on your landing. Now, why are your hips sliding back? This is the most important thing. It's one thing to know that your hips slide back or to notice it on yourself, but how do you fix it? Number 5, one of the reasons you might be having your heels pull up off the floor is that you're underutilizing your butt muscles. Yes, so your glutes and all of the surrounding muscles in the top of your thigh and your hips have a lot of work to do. They're your big power pushing muscles, right? They're what help you jump higher. They're what help you land softer. They're what help you plie on one leg with control or roll down from a point position on one leg, right? So your butt muscles are super important in all of the control of your momentum and the power of your push-off. If they get lazy, as many people's do, it's something called gluteal fatigue. It comes from sitting too much generally. It used to only affect office workers across America. But guess what? A lot of us sit. Or maybe it's not that you sit all day, they just never really learned how to kick in the first place. So gluteal fatigue can happen to anybody. And what happens is when your butt muscles stop doing their job and your hips kind of tilt forward because they're not engaging to help keep your pelvis upright, your quads have to do all the work. So then not only are you underutilizing your butt muscles, you are overusing your quad muscles, which will make them grow bigger and unhappy, which is not really something any of us want, right? We just want our legs to be nice and long and lean, and we want them to be happy and pain-free, and we don't want knee tightness, and we don't want other leg issues that can come from overworking your quads all day long. So there's a couple different ways that you can activate your glutes to help them kick in. Some of them are good old-fashioned 80s butt exercises, and I promise I will do a video just about activating your butt, so keep an eye out for that. The other thing is you can actually just hold a plie and sort of wake them up. So if you want to try it with me, start in first position because it's nice and simple. Do not overturn out. Big toe, pinky toe, center of your heel flat on the floor, and then plie, bend your knees. Now, from here, I just want you to feel, if you rock forward and your heels pop up, what does that feel like? If you rock back and your toes pop up, what does that feel like? Now, I want you to hold a nice flat foot position, and I want you to feel that your pelvis is straight. So if you were a bucket of water in your hips, you're not dumping water out the front, and you're not tucking and dumping water out the back. You've got a nice level pelvis, yeah? From here, I want you to start to feel the awareness of underneath your butt at the top of your thigh in the back and the bottom of your heel. Think of them as being like radio signals for each other, so they're connected. So if you push your heels into the floor, just where you are, you should feel the back of your leg having to work and kind of like get engaged, right? So that's the position that you're trying to activate. So you can activate it by just doing that. Plie, push your heels into the floor, feel those muscles kick in. You can do it in second. Plie, push those heels into the floor, feel those muscles kick in. You could even go lower and hold it and really get a leg workout, right? So that's one way you can activate them and get them ready for class. When you are trying to correct putting your heels on the floor, one of the most helpful things you can do is to slow down. I see a lot of my students struggle with this when they're learning new Petit Allegro, and it's really hard and it's really fast and it's unfamiliar, and then their heels start popping up like crazy. And it's a really hard habit to break when you're moving really fast. So I'd say on your own, get into a room, studio, hallway, doesn't really matter, and break it down and go slow and try to feel your feet, the heel actually pushing into the floor in every position so that you're helping your brain get the awareness of what the correct version feels like, and then that can translate to when you start moving faster. But if you just go fast, you probably will miss some of them. Another key thing to look out for when you are trying to correct heels down is do not overturn out. Don't force your turnout. So if you are twisting your ankles and knees to try to get a flat first position, you are most likely not going to be able to jump and relevate in that position. You will hurt yourself, and it's going to trigger those mechanical locks, and it will be practically impossible for you to dance with your heels down just because your body is trying to protect you. So don't force your turnout. And last but not least, check your alignment above your hips. So if getting your heels down is a common note, I want you to take a look at what you're doing with your upper body as well, because if your shoulders are forward, if your head is forward, I'll show you this way. If your shoulders are forward, if your head is forward, if your ribs are out, if you're swaying your back, any of those alignment issues are going to make everything that you're trying to fix harder to fix down below. So the best thing you can do is to make sure that everything is lined up in a straight line. If you're curious about how to have correct alignment, if that's a new concept for you, I have a video about that as well. But just keep that in mind. If you're struggling with heels down, check everything else. Maybe it's not just your legs. It could be starting from some habit up at the top. If you liked this lesson, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if there's a correction that you're looking for that you don't see yet, feel free to email me at secretballetcoach@gmail.com and maybe I will make a video for you.